Hi everyone, I'm Mike Casswell, and I understand you've bought a Boss GT-8 and you need to know how to use it. There's a lovely book it comes with that tells you how to use it. It's 106 pages of facts and figures, but I'm going to try and fast track you into actually getting hands-on with the unit and getting the best out of it straight away. So without further ado, let's take an overview of the unit. Okay, let's take an overview of the unit. It's best to kind of know what everything does before you start twiddling knobs and pressing buttons. The thing that makes or breaks all these types of units is trying to get a very organic amp-sounding sound, if you know what I'm saying. The key to getting that is this area here, which is your distortion, all your favorite distortion pedals, or models of all your favorite distortion pedals, and this area here, which is all your favorite amps and speaker cabinets. These units are usually very good at super clean sounds and super sort of fizzy, oversaturated, distorted sounds. The cool stuff is where you can get those in-between sounds, so as you can with a good valve amp or your favorite sort of amp combinations. And the place to look at is here and here. So this area here, let's just start with this area, overdrive distortion. It is what it is. It's all your favorite distortion and overdrive pedals. So off the top of my head, you know, a Tube Screamer, a Super Overdrive, a Boss Distortion, a Marshall Governor, they're all in there within the parameters. So that is kind of one option that you've got to think about. The second option is your amp. Choosing your favorite amp, what you want to put your distortion pedal into. All your favorite amps are here. I'm glad to see they've kind of updated their amp inclusion. They've got things as cool as a Hughes & Kettner Triamp. But there's Mesa Boogie dual rectifiers, there's Soldanos in here, there's PV5150s, there's your Fender Twins, Fender Tweeds. They're all in here. So if you can think that this is your distortion pedal, this is your amp. And that's how you would kind of, if you imagine what distortion pedal you've got plugged into what amp you've got, it gives you kind of a map as to what you're after within your sound. What is also really cool is they've actually included on the GT-8 actual knobs. And I found that sometimes playing live, when you get with a real band or the drummer, it's good just to instantly bend down and tweak these knobs. So if I think I'm lacking a bit of volume on my amp sound, I can literally just bend down, turn it up, press right, which is over here, and I'm off and running, almost in mid-song. I've done that many times, because sometimes you can program a sound in your living room or wherever, or your studio or whatever, and when you get with the band, that sound might not have enough body to it, or might not have enough top to it, and it's in your rehearsal room with your band, that's kind of the best time to get tweaking these knobs. So the first thing to think about before you do anything is before you get into any of the effects area, which is over here, is think about your distortion pedals, your overdrive pedals here, and your amp sound. Sometimes you don't need the amp sound. Sometimes it's just cool to have a distortion pedal into whatever you're running the unit into. Sometimes you don't need the distortion pedal on, and it's just cool to have like a crunchy amp sound from this section. You know, you don't have to have them both on at the same time. It's discretional, it's to taste. You know, just so think about how you would actually, if you ideally had the equipment in front of you in the room, if you had it there, how you would use it. So if you had a tweed amp cranked up, just find a tweed amp. If you don't want to put a pedal in front of it, you don't have this section on, this section here. But again, if you wanted to plug your distortion pedal into a power amp, then you wouldn't necessarily need the amp section on. This section is like the front end of your favorite amp. So it's the preamp section where it gives the gain, the treble, the bass. That's the preamp section. This is like what you put in front of it. So bear that in mind as we go through this DVD. Bear that in mind, that's the first thing to think about. This is the stuff that makes or breaks your sound. All the effects that it does and all the processing it does after the sound, imagine that as icing on the cake. What really makes or breaks your sound is getting that convincing amp response and amp the organic thing that a valve does with a good valve amp. So that's the first thing to think about. So really zooming in onto this overdrive distortion section, this is kind of obvious. This selects the different kind of sorts of pedal you're after. This little button here is the one to kind of press if you want it to kick in before you can actually hear the sound. And this type variation is a cool little button. If for instance you're kind of on this booster setting there, which I am right there, and I press type variation, you can see as I press that in the display, it's kind of going through different parameters for that specific distortion pedal. So you've got almost, you've got options for every pedal you kick in, which is very, very cool indeed. Going up to the amp section here, again, you've got type variation for the amp section. So if I'm choosing a tweed sound, which is in, and I press type variation, it goes tweed. You can see it saying tweed, warm crunch. It's just giving you some instant kind of Fender sounds. Because we're associating a tweed sound with an old vintage Fender, it might also think, well, if that's not quite your sound, but you want a Fender sound, press the type variation, and it'll get you to like a clean Fender Twin, a prosonic crunch sound. So it's all kind of the sounds that we're after for a tweed sound. As we go along here, you can see these channels A and B. For every amp you choose, it's giving you a kind of a channel switch option. So you can program like a clean sound on like a 5150, for instance, and then you can, with the channel switch, you can program it for it to switch channels as you would. Imagine you had an all singing, all dancing channel switching amp. You'd set one channel of it kind of clean sounding or crunchy, and then you'd have a lead sound. This is exactly what this does. It switches from the A to the B channel of your favorite amp. But not only that, it can switch from the A channel of a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier to the B channel of a Soldano. You can mix the amps up, which is very, very cool. Just to overcomplicate things for you even more, I'll give you another option. This solo button just here, which I happen to have in, gives you like a solo voice for that channel you've chosen. So even if you've got a clean channel, if you've got the solo option selected, it will give you a boost on that clean channel. Hopefully, I will demonstrate this throughout the DVD, but it's very, very comprehensive. I found it's kind of, it does what, if you imagine the amps in your head or in real life, your dream amps, it's kind of taking you through every kind of option that amp will do, or combinations of amps. Moving along, we have this compressor patch just here. I found, just a little hint for you, I found that when you're running a cleaner section from the section I've just talked about, the dirty sounds, when you're running it slightly cleaner, the compressor helps get that kind of organic kind of compression you get if you were running a loud amp in a room. It can sound quite cold and hard when you don't have this in. So just bear that in mind. Experiment with the cleaner tones of the amp section, and then put the compressor in front of it and see how that reacts with your guitar. The EQ just there, I've also found invaluable, because sometimes, depending on what you're putting this section through, what you're playing through, whether it's a power amp or your combo, the front end of your combo, or the effects return of your combo, I found that sometimes it can be a bit bass light, or you need that kind of chunk to your sound. And the EQ is invaluable for just giving it maybe a bit of bottom end and a bit of low mid that sometimes these sort of areas can lack, depending on what you're going through. Obviously, if you're playing through a small little 1x12 combo, it's no matter what you do here, it's always going to sound like a little 1x12 combo, especially when you get with a band. But the EQ can quite often sort of add that missing factor for that chunky sort of bigger cabinet sound. There's your wah. You can switch that in and out using the control pedal. I'll show you about that later, assigning control pedals. The loop function in this is amazing. It's a very, very good idea. We'll explore it later, but it's a very, very good idea. What it enables you to do is send a loop to, send a signal to maybe your favorite stomp boxes. If you've got some effects pedals that you really, really, want to use, you can quite easily send a signal to it and back into it. It comes out just here. Send, return, just there. Send a signal to your favorite stomp box or stomp boxes and return it, and you can have that in the patch down here, or whatever patch you've assigned it to. But also, even cooler than that, and this is how I've used this live a few times, is you can send a dry guitar signal to maybe your favorite tube amp. I've run this unit using a stereo power amp, left and right effects, and then with this loop send, I've just run a dry signal to my favorite amp head, whatever amp head I've used, and I've had that in the middle, so I can blend it in with maybe a volume pedal, my favorite amp in the middle, just running dry, completely dry, and then left and right with this unit, some delays and reverbs going on, and you get a lovely blend of kind of new technology and pure technology, if you know what I'm saying. This is a very, very cool feature. We will explore that later. If you look here, effects 1 and effects 2, basically, this is effects 1. This is your list of effects 1 that you can assign with this foot switch here. So it's just an extra. When effects 1 is on, you can check what effects you've got on. This is running all these effects for effects 1. Effects 2 is running all these effects for effects 2, and you can switch them in and out using these 2 buttons here, which is another very cool feature, especially when you're running this unit in manual mode. I'll show you about that later, but it can either run as each preset program, or you can press this little button here, it says manual, which turns the whole unit into a series of Boss stomp boxes. So that can make life very, very simple. If you're not used to sort of programming presets, press manual mode and the whole thing just becomes a series of actual separate units, if you know what I mean. And which is why it's listed amp select, overdrive, delay, chorus, and then effects 1, effects 2. So you've got 6 effects you can use just in a manual mode. So rather than thinking it's a multi-effects unit, it becomes 6 separate effects, which is very, very cool. And you can assign what effects you want on effects 1 and effects 2. So there's a lot of sort of parameters you can explore there. Okay, so master is your master. If we click in master, it's your master patch level, and if I go along the parameter, it's your master beats per minute for delays and things. It's just the master. It tells you everything that's happening in the actual unit. We got this is a very, very cool feature, the patch level. I found that you can program a patch in the comfort of your own home or studio, but when you get with a live band and you want to change patches, sometimes there can be you might have not quite got the levels right, which is really good on the fly. If you're in your rehearsal room or actually, in a gig, you can, if you hit a patch and it's suddenly really too loud, you can just literally bang it back down with the patch level, press right, and then that you've sort of smoothed it out again. So it's very, very good for evening out your levels of all your different sounds. This is another very, very cool feature. The older GTs didn't have that, but this is a very cool feature and very, very handy. I've quite often on the fly just thought, oh, that's a bit too loud. Maybe in between a song, actually on a gig, turned it down, press right, and I know that's sorted for the next time. Okay, moving along. This is your parameter button. So when you're into actually programming the presets, this takes you through all the parameters that you want to adjust with the wheel. This is your exit button. This is your right button. If you've spent some time actually programming a sound that you're happy with, just press right and it's stored. Effects chain gives you the order of the effects. You can completely change a dynamic of a sound by switching the order of the effects. If you've got a compressor in front of a distortion, that will sound different to a distortion in front of a compressor. So when you hit effects chain, that'll give you the list of how you've got things routed. As a rule, pretty much Boss have got the effects chain right. So I wouldn't mess too much with that, because generally they've sussed the right order. It's the right order usually, unless you really want to go out there and experiment yourself. That's cool. Just there is the name button. It's good fun to have your presets with the silliest name possible. So you can actually, when you press name, it comes up and you can change the name of your preset so you know what it is. Control and variable. The assign button. This is for. I'll show you about this later, but this is for assigning your control sort of a button, and also expression pedals. We'll get into expression pedals later, but this will be classed as an expression pedal. This as a factory, this is set at the factory as a volume pedal, and I found that keeping it as a volume pedal is the best idea, because it's great to have control of the volume live. And then I'm going to use an extra expression pedal to assign different parameters that I want to control. I could sweep in delays, I could sweep in extra distortion, I could use the expression pedal as a wah-wah, and I'll show you how to do that. It's very handy and it's an invaluable tool. But this is the area you use to try and assign an expression pedal and your control pedal. It tells what the control pedal what to do. If I press control now, let's see what it's doing. If you look just here, it's switching channels to probably a dirtier sound, and also it's kicking in a distortion just there. So I've probably got a nice clean channel sound. It's kind of nice and clean, and when I hit that, it's dirty. So it's kind of it's you know, I spent time sort of going through some patches to change them, just to show you some things. But that's what it does. This is the signing for expression pedal. Output select. This is very, very, very important. The output select, depending on how you're going to run your system, how you're going to run this unit. When I say run it, what you're going to plug it into. Whether you're going to plug it, if you're going to use it for recording, you're going to plug it straight into your mixing desk. If you've got a combo, you can plug into the front of the combo, or you can plug into the effects return of the combo. This is important. If I just press, it says output select, stack return. Now at the moment, just as we're sitting here talking, I'm running into a power amp, which is the closest thing to a stack return. It's like if you imagine let's imagine a Marshall stack. Instead of going into the front of the amp, I'm going, imagine in the imaginary world, I'm going into the effects return of the amp, which misses the front of the amp and goes into the power amp section. So because I'm going into a power amp, I'm actually using a Marshall power amp. I've got it set for stack return. But if I was to do some recording in the studio, if I had a session and I was doing some recording with it, I'd go along with the wheel. It says line phones. Now we've got our amp section running as a speaker simulator, which is great because this is where you can press that button there and get into different speaker combinations and also different mics on the speaker, which is really, really cool. So whenever you're recording, you need it on line phones. That's the speaker simulation thing. Other than that, if you're not, you choose what you're plugging into. So stack return would be for a power amp. Combo return is kind of the similar sort of thing. If you imagine you've got a combo and you're going into the power amp section of the combo, not the front of it, but the power amp, so it'll be the effects return. We've got JC120 return, so basically that's as clean as you can get it. It's kind of more high fidelity. Stack amp. So now we're getting into, it's saying that means you're going into the front of an amp. So if you've got a stack, that's the setting you'd have to go into the front of it. Combo amp, front of that, and small amp, front of that, JC120, front of that. So just for my power amp thing, I've got it set on stack return. Just because it says that doesn't necessarily mean it's set in stone. It's always good to experiment. You might find that the JC120 setting, JC120 return setting, works really well with the front of your stack. You don't know. Experiment. But I just found using the power amp that the stack return just has the right amount of frequencies that I want. So this button, the output select button, if I just press exit there, this output segment is very, very important. I'll show you the connectivity in a different section in the DVD. I'll show you how it works with different amps and power amps. There's your tuner. You can hit that, and then obviously you get your tuner. And there's the manual button. Very, very important from switching the parameters, your actual programs, switching them to separate Boss pedals, as I said earlier. That's about it. System, don't worry too much. If you get into there, if you're really into statistics, you press system, and it basically tells you what the whole machine is doing. There's your right button. Pressing right will store what you've used. So that's the kind of the front panel of it. Front panel of it. Just going along the top here, quickly. Expression pedal, sub control pedal 1 or 2. Now I'm going to show you how to use an expression. I'm going to be using an expression pedal with it, which is a very, very cool feature. But you can have like a sub control 1 or 2. You can actually buy extra foot switches like this. So depending on what you want to do, you can have extra things to switch in and out. But I'm going to be using it as an expression pedal. Amp control, if that is the next one, amp control just there. Very, very cool feature. If you are running an amp, as I said earlier with the loop button, if you are going to run an amp dry, just send a signal to an amp, you can come out here and actually channel switch your amp. You can switch the channels on your amp, which is a very, very cool feature. So that's what the amp control is, if you're wondering what that is. It will channel switch your amp. There's the send and return for getting to your amp or getting to your favorite effects pedal that you must have in your effects chain. We'll probably have a look at that later in the DVD. Phones for, plugging in for the privacy of your own world. You can plug in your earphones. And there's your left and right. I'm running in stereo, but if you have got only one amp, you come out of the mono channel there. So basically, whatever stereo is going on in there, it gets monoed. Don't get too hung up by the stereo thing. Quite often, if you're playing loud in a band and you're being mic'd up, quite often, sometimes a good mono sound can sound much more direct and much more punchy than a flashy kind of stereo sound. It might sound great to you standing in front of your speakers and everything's going on like that, either side of you or behind you with your 2 amps or your stereo power amp. But out front, some of that can get lost, and the sound guy probably just put mono you anyway. So sometimes a mono signal can be much more punchy anyway. We've just got here the level button. That is kind of a make or break thing as well. Sometimes you can overload. If you're going to plug into the front of your combo, you could overload the front of your combo. So experiment with that, but there's plenty of leeway in terms of volume. You can really mess things up if you overload it. If you've got it cranked up, the front of your amp won't know what's hitting it. So just bear that in mind, kind of to taste really. Be careful with that. And there's your input. So that's pretty much the pedal as an overview, a quick overview. So let's get into it and start having some fun.